Governments deny it. Militaries deny it. Even the mainstream media denies it. But they are here, and they've been here for a very long time. The Mutual UFO Network has been on the front lines uncovering the truth since 1969, and now we're sharing that truth with you. Welcome to MUFON What's Up with your hosts, Katie Page, Christopher DePerno, and Katie Cook, exclusively on the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. Wondering what's up? So are we.
What's up? It's Tuesday night, and you're listening to MUFON What's Up Radio, the show that says discovery starts with curiosity, and curiosity starts with MUFON, brought to you by KGRADB.com. Please go to their website and subscribe. There's so much great content and wonderful shows on there to listen to. We are endorsed by MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, always asking that all-important question, are we alone in the universe? I'm your host, Katie Page, Colorado MUFON State Director and International MUFON Mars Administrator. We have a wonderful guest for you tonight. We have Grant Cameron, and I bet Grant Cameron doesn't remember this moment, but years ago when I first got into MUFON, he actually was a presenter for Colorado MUFON, and he spoke at the Tivoli Center in downtown Denver. And what he said in that presentation resonated with me so much, I actually physically had to get up and leave the room because I was getting so emotional by some of the things that he was talking about. And then I realized I left my jacket and I had to go back and get it. And so, I'm so excited to get to talk to him. And later for Case of the Week, I had a weird synchronicity happen that also included Grant Cameron. So I'm excited to have him on. But first, let's get to introducing our co-host. We have the wonderful, talented, beautiful Katie Cook. You see her on Country Music Television, and she loves all things UFO and paranormal. Welcome, Katie. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. And don't feel bad. I once left my belt at an Indian buffet. That's pretty embarrassing when you have to go back into a buffet and say, I left my belt.
Because you're eating
too much. So yeah, because I ate too much. So yeah, don't feel bad about leaving your jacket. But I'm so thrilled that Grant is on the show tonight. This is going to be fantastic.
It is. Oh my goodness, yes. That's funny. And let's bring on Mr. Chris DePerno, State Director of New York. He's also on the ERT, and Jerry and Jenna. Hey, Chris.
Oh, wow. What a great show this is going to be tonight. This is going to be fantastic with Grant Cameron. He's one of my favorites. And I got to tell you, he doesn't.
What? Not again.
Oh,
Wait
no.
a minute, I'm getting a phone call.
What the?
I don't know if I should answer it.
Probably
Hold
not.
on.
Go for it.
Hello?
You Jerry?
No, sir.
This is Gino from We Fix It Auto Garage.
Yes?
What the hell is this thing you drop off at the garage?
What?
What kind of car is this thing? We don't know what it is, and there's some note by Jerry that says, give the ship a tune-up. It needs 3 pounds of element 15 and check the electromagnetic propulsion system. It's going to be. What the hell is an electromagnetic propulsion? And we don't sell element of 15. I get the joke off my lot before I call the cops. You know something, do you guys are crazy.
Yes, sir. Bye. What the fuck? I'm screaming. What the hell is wrong with you?
Jerry.
Beep, beep.
I mean, Chris. I mean, all of you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, y'all.
Was that really Bob Lazar on the phone pretending to have an accent?
I'm telling you, this guy is nuts. Anyway.
Oh my gosh. Katie, what do you have to kick us off?
Well, nothing that funny. Well, no, it is pretty funny. Okay, so we have our meme of the week. Amanda, if you want to pull that up, I thought this is a pretty cute one. Isn't that cute? All right, so for you guys listening, it's the alien mom talking to the alien son. And she says, son, when you go back by Earth, please pick me up a cow and a drunk guy for your dad. The son says, the usual, check. I can do it. And we have our paranormal pop of the week. This one, let's see if I can. Oh, yeah, it's actually looking pretty good this week. I figured out if I just put it in front of my face, then the camera knows what to do with it. It is the classic silver saucer pop Maybe this is Jerry's saucer that he's trying to drop off at the auto mechanic. And this is so cool because it's got like the metallic, stuff on the outside, but it's totally edible. I love that. I love these pops, and it smells really sweet. They always do. If I can get through the show without eating it, it'll be a miracle. So you can buy those at paranormalpops.com. And finally, we talked a couple weeks ago about actor Nichelle Nichols, aka Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek. She passed away at the age of 89, and of course, total trailblazer in entertainment. Well, it was recently announced that a symbolic portion of her cremated remains and a DNA sample will be launched into deep space on board the Celestis Incorporated upcoming historic Enterprise flight, very aptly named. Wow. And NASA's Bill Nelson said, Nichelle Nichols was a trailblazing actress, advocate, and dear friend to NASA. At a time when Black women were seldom seen on screen, Nichelle's portrayal of Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek held up a mirror to America that strengthened civil rights. Nichelle's advocacy transcended television and transformed NASA. After Apollo 11, Nichelle made it her mission to inspire women and people of color to join this agency, change the face of STEM, and explore the cosmos. Today, as we work to send the first woman and the first person of color to the moon under Artemis, NASA is guided by the legacy of Nichelle Nichols. I'm
so excited.
That gave me all the feels. Yeah, I just love that. So I wanted to share that.
So hopeful they get Artemis up on Friday. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. We'll see.
What a pioneer.
All right.
Awesome.
Chris, what you got? Dare I ask, what do you have for the news this week?
It's so good.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Amanda, roll one. Here comes the alien invasion. Extraterrestrials plan to take over the Earth by 2029. I got to get the army ready. Phil Schneider was vocal before his death about what he learned about aliens while working under a high-level security clearance for the U.S. government. The source does not make any claims as to the veracity of this story, and neither do I, but rather presents his extraordinary claims for the reader. Schneider met with ridicule from many, but there are also many who believe that after watching his videos, such as Veterans Today, senior editor Gordon Duff, who called himself a UFO whistleblower, Schneider was found dead in his apartment in 1996. Though it was ruled a suicide, some believe it was murder. Okay. In 1954, then President Dwight D. Eisenhower made a pact with 3 species of aliens, said Schneider in a lecture at 1995 Preparedness Expo, in exchange for alien technology. Eisenhower allegedly gave aliens permission to abduct some cattle and a limited number of humans. Well, I can tell you that they've certainly got their numbers. For decades, livestock have been found inexplicably mutilated across the United States, where more than 10,000 attacks have been recorded throughout the country. Although livestock has been, somebody better check these guys' cholesterol. They've been eating all this stuff. Although livestock has been found with their organs removed in a precise manner, some say it's aliens. As for the human abductees, Schneider said many of these thousands of people missing worldwide may have been taken by aliens. He said there are 9 races of aliens that see human beings as a bag of food. I'm a bag of fat, so if you want it, go ahead. The technology aliens gave to uphold their end of the exchange, including a kind of metal that is nearly indestructible. Schneider showed the audience what he said was a piece of this metal. It is made of nitrobolumium, an element which is on our periodic table. I never heard of it. Of course, I flunked science. And marionite. Sounds like an Italian sauce. Alien element you won't find mentioned in Earth textbooks. He said the government also developed a spy satellite with the help of aliens that could spot a dime on your kitchen floor. It used infrared technology and had a resolution factor of 99.999961. The aliens violated the pact, says Schneider, by taking more humans than agreed upon. A war with the aliens has been fought ever since. He said the aliens plan to take over the Earth by 2029. Do you really want this junkyard? Really? And he called on the government to tell citizens what he knows. He said, we don't have a whole heap of time left. Really? Amanda, roll that video.
Anyway, this all led up to later on, about 6-8 years later, 1954, during the Eisenhower administration, led to a interesting treaty called the Greada 1954 Treaty. It was the Alien-Human Treaty. And supposedly the aliens had come in and exchanged technology, and they'd want to take an occasional human being and a few head of cows, and accurate books were supposedly to be kept, and all this kind of stuff. And of course, eventually all that broke down, and aliens are notorious for being liars, even greater liars than so-called, in quote, we humans are. So alien treaties are often just not even the pieces of paper they're written on. They're just really kind of worthless. Once again, where did we get this new technology? Well, obviously we've had a little hand in that. Our little alien so-called buddies, have kind of exchanged things, not without a great cost. The cost of which has been a lot of people have disappeared. Some, and I'll blow this statistic by you. There's, according to current FBI and Defense Intelligence Agency and CIA statistics, 100,000 children and 1 million adults disappear every year, and these are not kidnappings or murders or rapes or suicides or anything, totally unaccounted for. And where are these people going to? Nobody knows. Maybe one of us in this room or somebody has encountered such an individual and lost a loved one or a friend or something, and that's unfortunate. Orders from my best friend, believe it or not, these more powerful outer space alien entities, we might call them the large grays or the small grays. Sinister forces indeed. And you might want to say, well, gee, how come we don't see more of this kind of thing? Well, you can just imagine. If you're only being told 5% or less of the truth, that isn't very much to go on.
Well, I hope that's
not
true.
A medium? How come there's not a medium alien? There's a small alien, there's a large alien. There's no medium alien.
Like the three bears.
They don't make anyways, what do you think of this, Cookie?
I don't know. Large grays and small grays, people do tend to have very different experiences depending on which one they're dealing with. All these stories. So this one is like there's 9 races. The numbers part always drives me crazy. I'm like, we have no idea. But they say never trust an alien. So maybe some of that story is true. And I know people go missing.
Don't even trust humans.
Yeah, right.
Right. There you go.
Those numbers seemed awfully high that he was saying about humans missing. I do realize a lot of humans go missing, but that seemed a little exaggerated to me. What do you think, Katie Page?
I'm right there with you, Katie, on that. I think numbers seemed a little high, but yeah, people, look at David Paulides and Missing 401. People are disappearing a lot in our national forests. What's happening to these people? And I think they're ruling out, animal attacks or other nefarious things I don't know, but I'm with you. When they start pulling out numbers and motives, when you start talking about ET race's motives, we put a very human spin on everything, and we can't do that. We don't know what that is. And every week now we're like, I thought the cattle mutilation thing was solved for the most part. I thought we were done with that. But, most of them are solved. I would say 80%. That's where I'm at with that. But who knows? I don't know. Some of it's true, like anything else. You take bits and pieces of these stories and, weigh them out.
I wish they would abduct tofu or something like that. Cattle is like, I don't know. Anyway, let's get on with the other story. Amanda! Okay, anyways. Did the U.S. military destroy an alien and Nazi base in Antarctica? Back in 2017, an anonymous whistleblower wrote, I'm a civilian contractor for the defense industry company you probably heard of. We sell advanced hardware and electronic gear mainly to the U.S. Army and Marines. I was in the Marines. I had nothing that was advanced. I handled a lot of the logistics for moving mass quantities of material around. I was enjoying a few brews on a Saturday when I got called for an emergency. I didn't think much of it until I got there, and then there were some heavy hitters, top brass there I've never seen. We worked closely with the military, so when a bunch of colonels showed up I never met, I knew something serious business was in the works. On top of that, some of them really looked like they were panicked. Can't divulge much, but I can say there is an instant order to move a ton of some badass state-of-the-art gear down to Antarctica. And also found out all civilians are getting evacuated as soon as possible. That does not sound good. Before that, in the year 2016, many prominent officials and individuals visited Antarctica, including U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, landed in Antarctica during the peak of the U.S. presidential election. Maybe he was campaigning. Why would he be serving the Secretary of State leaving the U.S. at such a critical time just to observe global warming patterns in Antarctica? Could it be because someone uploaded a video on Facebook made by a Russian satellite that passed over the Trans-Arctic Mountains, which shows a huge structure including a pyramid and a building in the form of a swastika? The footage shows ancient ruins, a megalithic structure, as well as a complex city. Cookie, you ought to be proud. I said megalithic. See, I can't say it now. Damn it. Okay. As well as a complex
You started getting cocky there.
I was getting a little cocky. Anyways, let's get on with this story. A complex city, including the structure in the shape of a swastika, including other buildings at Antarctica, which are only visible from space. Amanda, roll that video while I have to spit some of this stuff out.
In 2017, someone uploaded a video on Facebook, made by a Russian satellite, Spy, that passed over the Trans-Antarctic Mountains and which shows huge structures including a pyramid and a building in the form of a swastika. The original video, dated 2014, certainly belonged to the Russian Aerospace Force, so it's very strange to be on the website called tamsecret.blogspot.ru. The video, however, has been removed from the YouTube channel and therefore from the website. The footage, which you can see following a link below this video, clearly shows these structures at the foot of the Trans-Antarctic Mountains. We can, among other structures, see a pyramid and a building in the form of swastika. The site is blurred on Google Earth. In 2017, when I did a search using Google Earth, the site was blurred but apparently normal. Now, the place has brown spots and other highly suspicious spots as if there had been an explosion, as in a war scenario. As always, see the evidence and draw your own conclusions. Your comment?
Well, what do you think, Cookie?
I do think something's going on in Antarctica for sure, but when I see the pictures, it's just like, is it like pareidolia with structures? You know, it's not face. Well, sometimes it is faces too. I can't tell.
I truly believe there's something going on in Antarctica.
I do think something's going on. Yeah, it would be such a obvious place for something to be hiding, but you know, if it keeps melting, maybe we'll get our answers. So
we do know that the Nazis were very interested in Antarctica at the time. They did do exploring down there. That's recorded and logged. So why wouldn't they do it? You know?
No, they might. I think like I said, when I see the pictures, I'm kind of like, that really could just be, you know, we're seeing a little bit of mountain peaks or something. I can't tell a lot from the pictures personally. I just shy away from going, oh, that's definitely a structure. You know, I don't know.
What do you think?
It looked like an abandoned Nazi base to me with an airplane. Like the upper image looked like completely an airplane. I mean, you can almost see the tail wing, but Who knows? Maybe it's something just abandoned, and it is kind of suspicious that they pull it down and then everything's blurred out. So who knows what it is? It's just probably some old abandoned base or structure. You know, they don't want anybody poking around or questioning. So who knows?
There's definitely something down there. I don't disagree with that.
No, there's been too many stories that
Yeah.
come from military people that have said that there's some sort of secret base, some sort of secret stuff going on in the Antarctic. And I know when my daughter did a thing with college down there, she actually went to the Antarctic. There were certain places they were told that they can go and certain places that they cannot go. And they had to have a guide, and this guide had to make sure that they stayed away from certain areas. So, and there was no explanation for it. So,
I mean, I'm sure it's a very, very dangerous place if you get off track, you know, for many reasons, but I prefer to think that's suspicious.
I will tell you this, just a little off the record. When my daughter was down there, she said, "Dad, we were hiking through sub-zero weather, and then all of a sudden it became 75 degrees. There is an ozone layer hole, and they had to literally strip down to their T-shirts because it was so hot in that one particular area. And they actually hiked there so they could experience that, you know, for their experiments and stuff."
Interesting.
Interesting stuff. All right. Well, do we have
Thank you, Chris.
case? Yes.
Oh.
Thank you for all that news.
Well, you're welcome.
What about case of the week?
So I did a little something different for Case of the Week this week. I stayed out of the MUFON CMS, and I kind of wanted to talk, not this last weekend, but the weekend before last. I drove down to New Mexico. Tom Whitmore was there with me, and we did a few days of investigating and research at David Marler's place there outside of Albuquerque. So I think there's some photos, and I'll just kind of share some of those. So I was there because a lot of you know I had experiences from 1975 to 1978 in Elbert County, Colorado. It was known as the Clearview Ranch. It was a lot like the Skinwalker Ranch. And in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files, they talked about NORAD, and there were two A-7D interceptors that were supposedly in pursuit of a UFO and crash. And I got all the information on that. There it is. That's the notes from the briefing document that John Schuessler gave me, talking about these two Air Guard pilots, and they were in pursuit of this UFO, 1975, and it crashed. So I was kind of looking for anything like that, and I come across, there we are, there's Tom Whitmore, David Marler, and I digging through the files, and I came across this really interesting 32-page document, and talk about synchronicity. So this is just page one of the 32-page document, but I started reading the document today, and I'm going to read a little bit of it. But basically, it talks about an incident that occurred. This document, by the way, was dated June 30th, 1976, from an incident that occurred on November 11th, 1975, where the North American Air Defense Command, NORAD, has acknowledged publicly that an unidentified object was tracked on radar and two F-106 jets were scrambled. The interceptors were scrambled after it. Military personnel at the radar base in northern Canada saw more than one object visually at the time, as did 7 police officers and a number of citizens in the area. Early in the morning of November 11th, 1975. So again, the same year as my Alberta County stuff, the Canadian Forces radar site in Falconbridge, Ontario, reported an object 25 to 30 nautical miles south of the site and ranging in altitude from 26,000 to 72,000 feet. It appeared as a bright star, but much closer, he continued. Witnesses said there were 3 objects sighted. There didn't seem to be any lateral movement, but there was vertical movement, and actually very significant vertical movement. The interceptors made no contact with the objects. However, they cited heavy crystallized ice structures were present. So, and it goes on to say that it's interesting because the American government claims it got out of the UFO business in 1969, which we all know when MUFON took over, when Project Blue Book was closed down. But according to Captain Hilchey, he said that was very strange because in accordance with normal procedures, he classified the UFO report and sent it to Colorado Springs, NORAD in Colorado Springs. We have a procedure that if a strange occurrence occurs in our system, that we send off a report to NORAD in Colorado Springs, he said. The report then goes on to say, the report goes into another incident in 1975, and this is the synchronicity. And this is a woman who lives in a small community near Brandon, and she saw a fiery red, and she said it was in the shape of an ice cream sundae with like a cherry on top. She was driving a school van, and she had 6 children with her. 3 of them were her own, so 7 total people saw this. And the investigator on this particular case was none other than Grant Cameron. And what's interesting, the same type of craft was spotted in Elbert County, Colorado in 1975. And they said it was like an ice cream cone. So I just thought the synchronicities there were really interesting. So if you go, Amanda, to the next photo. Yeah, so this is NUFORS, and if you want to know more about this incident, you can go to this website here. I have the web address there. Amanda, if you can bring that up, you can read more about this incident right there. And then the next photo here are the interceptors, the type of interceptors they scrambled there in Canada. They were scrambled out of Michigan, interestingly enough. I learned a lot today. I learned that NORAD has actually 8 different regions. So they were scrambled from Michigan to Canada. And then the next photo. And there I am. So in this 32-page document, it says that this was reported to the National Enquirer. And David Marler goes, "Hey, I have those articles." So we go over, open the drawer, and like the third one down, there it was on the front page. That the Air Force scrambles jets to intercept a UFO, and I'm like, there it is. And it was just such a great moment to find that. So that's my case of the week, my synchronicity case of the week. I just thought it was super interesting, to find those documents. And I just want to encourage everybody out there, there's nothing more important than actually going and digging and doing the research and the data. So, yeah,
that's really good one. What's with the ice cream cone shape? You said ice cream cone, and look who showed up. That reminds me of Close Encounters, with the ice cream cone shape.
Right. I can't wait to talk to Grant about that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool that you found that. And, yeah, we'll have to ask him all about it. Do we have time for Bob Spearing? I think we could run that real quick. You catch up with Bob this week, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Good. Let's roll the tape. Let's go with it. Come on, Amanda.
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Spearing. I'm MUFON's International Director of Investigations, and I'd like to show you some interesting pictures that were released this month that are actually 32 years old. There's actually one picture. In 1990, in Calvine, Scotland, in the Scottish Highlands, there were some hikers who saw a rather strange diamond-shaped object in the sky. They took 6 pictures of it. They brought it to a local newspaper, and the British Ministry of Defense, the MOD, took the pictures from the newspaper and never returned them. Dr. David Clark, who is a scientist and a ufologist in England, tracked down one of the pictures that was at a Sheffield area university. All we had for 32 years was a photostated scan of what is probably Britain's most famous photograph. This is what we've had for 32 years since 1990. Now remember, we didn't have digital photography back then. This was a old-fashioned photo with a negative. The negatives disappeared also. And right now we're going to look at the actual photo that was released this month. Let's show that. Pretty impressive. And when they've analyzed the photo, you can see that there is one military jet. And according to the experts working on it, there is also a faint trace of a second jet. What happened to the other 5 photos? We don't know. Now, the question is this anomalous? My personal feeling is that it's not faked and that it is anomalous. But one legitimate thing to think about is, could it have been some sort of secret military craft? Now look at the diamond. Look on the right side of the diamond. It looks like there may be some sort of small appendage at the back. Some people believe that this might be the bird of prey, Boeing's bird of prey. Only one was built for the U.S. military, but it allegedly did not fly until 1996. But this photo was 6 years earlier. So I'm going to leave it up to the viewer here. I'm going to show you 2 pictures of the Boeing bird of prey built by the U.S. military, and you decide if this could possibly be what was seen. We'll look at this first picture. We'll look at a second one. And let's go back quickly to the Calvine photo. Could that be the Boeing bird of prey? My personal feeling is no. Anyway, that was the big news this month as far as release of famous photos and videos by the government and other entities. And that is called the Calvine photo, 32 years old. This is Bob Spearing. Thank you for having me on, Chris, Katie, and Katie. And I hopefully will see you guys next week. Bob Spearing signing off.
I like this
Thank
one.
you, Bob. Yeah, me too. It's too big to be that.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, I think this is the real deal. It's not the bird of prey. I talked to
No.
Bob about this. They looked very closely at this photo, and this is probably one of the best unidentified photos that there is out there, especially now that you got the real deal. And I think this is going to be a game changer.
It's very cool. I mean, it could be ours, but I don't think it was the bird of prey. I still wonder what we had. You know how we always talk about how we're decades ahead of what we know we
Right.
have. So, you know, who knows?
So
Yeah.
But very interesting. I bet our guest would have an opinion on it.
yes,
got a
it's
lot of
time to bring him
opinions.
in.
He's great.
Yeah. Let's bring him on in. What do you guys say? All
Yes.
right. So Grant has been a UFO researcher since 1975. Again, the 70s is my favorite decade. He is the winner of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year and the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year awards. He is a world recognized expert on presidents and UFOs, the Canadian government and UFOs, the alien music connection, which sounds fascinating to me, and the relationship of consciousness to UFOs. Grant is the author of several books, including Contact Modalities, The Keys to the Universe, The Portals, and UFOs of Mount Shasta, and many, many more. So please welcome to the show, Grant Cameron. Thank you so
Thanks
much
for having me
being
on.
here.
Hello,
Yeah,
Grant.
it's our pleasure.
It's
Our
an honor
honor.
to be on.
Yes. I would like to start off and get your opinion. Do you remember that case from 1975? What's your opinion on that?
Well, there's a bigger story to it. I think it's in the book. I wrote the book Charlie Red Star, which talked about my encounters in 1975, 76, and that happened in 75. What you got to remember is that's a NORAD document, but there was a bunch of other cases that happened exactly the same time. And there was a NORAD document. I remember Bob Pratt from National Enquirer had come. They were going to call Winnipeg, Manitoba, the area where I was, the UFO capital of the world. We had so many UFO sightings for 2 years. So I was talking to Bob, and he was actually going to investigate that case. And Minnesota and Wisconsin had sightings at the same time. So he was flying around. He'd come in and he'd work for a couple of days, then he'd fly out someplace else. And National Enquirer had this money. They could just throw money at everything. But what people don't, what you have to put in with that Falcon Bridge, which is the sort of the NORAD headquarters for Canada, that the UFOs are around there, but at exactly the same time, they were along the northern tier bases with the nuclear weapons. So Bob Pratt got this document released through the National Enquirer. I remember it was $800 and some odd for search fees. And I said to Bob Pratt, I said, "You're not going to pay that, are you?" And he said, "Well, of course we're going to pay it." Okay. And they got this document, and it's the document, the famous document where the nuclear missile silos are visited by UFOs. So you have Loring Air Force Base, which is in Maine, right along the border. You have Wurtsmith Air Force Base, which is in Michigan, where you talk about these jets being scrambled. There's UFOs inside the nuclear weapons storage area there. During that week, late October, early November, this 10-day period or whatever, it was 12-day period. And in Minot, North Dakota, which is a nuclear missile base in North Dakota, and also at Malton Air Force Base in Montana. So all the nuclear missiles were being visited during that week, and exactly during that period of time was another very, very famous event happened right in the middle of all these nuclear weapon visitations, and that was the abduction of Travis Walton. Happened in November of 1975. And so I don't think these are coincidences. I always put the appearance of UFOs, especially at that time, I had to nuclear weapons. If you read the conclusion of the book, there was a nuclear a base that they were building in North Dakota at a place called Coles Route, North Dakota. And they had put what they called Nixon's Pyramid. It was a giant facility, looked like a giant pyramid. And they were looking over the Canadian, say, area, because the idea was that there might be a nuclear missile attack, but it would come over the North Pole. So they had this big giant radar array there. And then they had put in 100 new nuclear missiles in 1975 into North Dakota. So North Dakota at that time, if it had been a country, it would have been a nuclear superpower. It had 300 Minuteman III missile silos in North Dakota. And they put in 100 new ones in 1975 in February. That's when all the UFO sightings started. And they put them in. And what it was pre-Star Wars. So in Star Wars, they had these weapons that they built in outer space. But in 1975, they had these missiles built. So the idea was if Russia launched, they would launch these giant missiles that had 5 megaton nuclear missiles on the end of the missile. They would launch it and try to catch the Russian missile in outer space as it was traveling in outer space. And if they missed it with that, they had these small sprint missiles that would try to explode above the nuclear missile silos to create shrapnel, so that the missile coming in would be shredded by this sort of shrapnel. And the idea was that people don't realize is that when there's a nuclear missile attack, they're not going after New York, they're not going after Los Angeles or anything. They're going after the nuclear missile silos.
Right.
And if you don't get the nuclear missile silos, you ain't going to see what's going to happen next, because you've got to take out the missile silos. So North Dakota had put in 100 new nuclear missiles in this, and it was the only advanced weapon system that was ever built. There was going to be 3 of them, but 2 of them never were built. The one in North Dakota was built, and they made an agreement with the Russians in November of 1975 to take the missiles out in exchange for Russians taking out missiles, and they shut the missile silo down, and the UFOs went away. So to me, a lot of what you see in UFOs is got to do with nuclear missiles. You were mentioning before. Cattle mutilations have stopped. They haven't happened for years. There's the odd one. There was one in Wisconsin or in Washington a couple of years ago, but basically it stopped. And what my theory is that all the cattle mutilations occurred east of the Rocky Mountains on the plains, and that's where they tested all the above ground nuclear missiles. And it was everything that was all the cattle mutilations. Most of them happened downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. And if you go to Sweden, you'll see a completely different spectrum of sightings. You'll see, I asked them about cattle mutilations, their top investigator there, who's on the board for the big, what's it called? They have all the books and all the files and stuff in rooms and rooms and rooms. It's the biggest one in the world. And he sits on the board there, Sven. And
AFU, the AFU.
Yeah, and he mentioned the fact that they only had cattle mutilations from 1988 to 1992, and he eliminated all of them as being natural. And he said there are no abductions in Sweden, and that's the top investigator saying that. So you get this thing where you start looking at sightings in different countries, and you start seeing these patterns. For example, Sweden, in fact, they had one just this year. They have these missiles that started in 1946 that looked like missiles that would fly along and they would crash into swamps. They've been doing it since 1946. They've got, he showed me how many cases they had. It's immense number of cases, and they're still happening. There's still these rocket things going over Sweden and crashing into swamps. So you see these sort of patterns that happen, and around the patterns, you sort of get sort of an idea of what might be going on in terms of the things that we do seem to bring these people in. They seem to, it depends what you're looking at. For example, you mentioned abductions at the very beginning, and I've always talked about whatever you're thinking of Stephen Greer. If you look at the Stephen Greer, the CE5s, there are no abductions. There are no grays. There are no reptilians. There is none of that kind of stuff. And if you showed one book that I had on Mount Shasta, I wrote 2 books on Mount Shasta, and that was sort of a thing that I got dragged into. I didn't want to do. I went there, and they predicted it's this group called Mission Rama. They've been around since 1974, the year before I had my experience. And if you look at their group, and there's 25,000 of them around the world, these groups, and they have these sort of engagements, almost like CE5s, but they do a meditation. They do it's a very sort of Christian-based thing, and they do all this kind of stuff. And I was there for all this stuff. And they have these people that can open these Zendras, which are like portals. And I documented 2 that they'd opened in Mount Shasta, and there's actually a number after that. But anyway, and it comes down to the idea that the CIA was very interested in portals, and so they were going to actually send someone with me to Mount Shasta to investigate this idea of them being able to open what they called Zendras. And if you go through the Mission Rama stuff, and they've recorded everything since 1975, all the groups have recorded exactly what messages they got. And in my case, they had the message, and they had predicted that there would be an encounter on, I think it was August the 18th, 2017. I got a message from the alien that through one of the people that was sort of the contactee guys, that they knew I was coming to the mountain, and there was going to be what they call a program sighting. So the sighting was that there would be a sighting at 9:33 on the Saturday night. At 9:33, I was sitting there, and this thing started flashing over my head. I'm telling you, after that happened, there was 2 people that got the message, and one was a woman who had a PhD from Columbia University. When I saw that, I mean, I was sold. I bought into this idea that these people had incredible amount of ability to bring things in. And I'll give you a case that you may not even heard about. That happened last year at Mount Shasta. It was during the pandemic. And this was a group of, I was supposed to go, but I didn't go. They wanted 111 people there. Adama, which was one of the beings, said he was going to appear. And after it happened, I heard that something had happened. So I tracked down some of the people. We actually got 3 people on camera. We were interviewing 9 people. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Mount Shasta thing where they go, and it's up on what's called the sand flats. And it's sort of an open area surrounded by these giant trees, evergreen trees that are huge. And so it's this area where it's sand and there's nothing. And people have their meditation groups there, and they sit in circles, and they do all these protocols to open these Zendras. And every 2:00 in the morning, there was 9 of these people. Most of them were Mexicans and Latinos who were living in California, Los Angeles, San Francisco. They were sitting there having a birthday party. It was 2:00 in the morning. And the one woman who was sensitive said, "They're here." And the other people said, "How do you know they're here?" "I just know. I know they're here." And they said, so they sat there, and then she said, "There they are." And there was this light in the forest. And of course they said what everybody else says. "Oh, it's just probably a campsite. It's somebody's campsite." And she said, "No, that's them. They're here." And so then they heard what they said was like a herd of buffaloes coming across first she said, "They want us to come. I've got a message. They want us to go across the field, and they want us to come to the other side where they are." And if you've ever been to Mount Shasta in the middle of the night, you cannot see your hand in front of your face, and it's got holes and divots and stuff. And they said, "No way, we're not going across this field. Somebody's going to get killed trying to walk in the dark across this field." And so they said, "We can't do it. We're scared. We can't come across." So the woman got the message and said, "Okay, so we'll come to you." And these 3 people we're talking to said it sounded like a herd of buffaloes coming across this field, and this it's coming across the field. And then suddenly there's this being and light, beings of light were above them, and they were levitated into the air. 9 people, and these people are live. You can actually track these people down. 9 people levitated into the air, and they started doing this oming. So that's one of the protocols they use this oming protocol. So they started oming, and they said it was like they were underwater. And as soon as I heard that, I said they were inside a Zendra. People who have been in these Zendras, they put 7 of them at a time. There's a lot of people who have been in these Zendras, in these Mission Rama things, and they'll all tell you the same thing. When you talk, it sounds like you're underwater. And they said, it sounded like we were underwater. We're oming, and then the being started to om. And we were levitated into the air. And so I said to the one guy, I said, "Well, was Adama there?" "Yes, Adama was there." And I said, "Well, how many beings were there?" And he said, "There were as many beings as there was trees in the forest." I said, "Are you kidding me?" And the guy said, yeah, there was that. And like these
Wow.
people are on record.
Well,
This actually happened in
Wow.
2020.
Wow. Well, back to the missile silo thing, that certainly would make sense in Elbert County, Colorado. You had Francis Warren out there. They had nuclear weapons. And in Elbert County, they had missile silos out there. And this was all in 1975 as well. And, we do know that the Air Force and NORAD and Camp Carson were very aware of this. So I agree with you. I think those years, all that seems to really tie together. So it's really interesting to hear, that this went up into Canada and all across, So yeah, that's fascinating stuff. I just wanted to make a quick comment on that because it ties in for us too.
I had a girl who was actually, I think she may be still assistant state director in North Dakota, who actually took me to a place called Coles Route, North Dakota. And she had a missile silo sighting. So I told her I wanted to go to the sighting. And so we were there. And I was actually the state director of MUFON at that time for North Dakota was waving at the camera and stuff. And I said, come on, give this a break, man. I'm from Canada. They may, sort of harass you. I could end up in jail for the rest of my life. Quit waving at the camera. And so we were at the fence. And so I said to the girl, I said, so where was the UFO? Where did you see the UFO? She said, oh, it came out of that metal thing. And what happened was they lived in Coles Route, North Dakota, which has maybe, it has nobody now. Almost nobody lives there. But it had at that time, say maybe 300, 400 people, something like that. And she said what they would do for entertainment is they would go to the fence and the boys would climb over the fence into the nuclear missile silo. And they would try to get this light. There was a tall white sort of a pole there. And there was a light on the top that was yellow. And when the yellow light would go off, that would mean there would be an alert and they were coming because somebody was going to interfere with the nuclear missile. And the idea would be to get the yellow light to go off. So the boys would climb over and they would try to get the light to go off. And the girls would throw stones at the fence to try to get this light to go off. This is what these kids did for entertainment. So she said they were going to one day and there was 3 girls and they were going to go to the fence and they were going to throw stones at the fence. And they were there and this UFO came and she said, I said, where'd it come? She said, it came out of that metal thing there. I said, are you sure it came out of the metal thing? Yeah, it came right out of the lid of that metal thing. And that's where that's the roof or the lid of the nuclear missile silo. And I said, wow. And she said, it came up and the 3 girls were there. The 2 girls absolutely freaked out. They started screaming. They went back. The 3rd girl wet her pants and she stood there and this thing came up and it was copper. It was round. It was swirling and it had like burn marks on this copper thing. Went about 25 feet in the air and then it flew off. In this plain daylight, and this girl became very intuitive. She was predicting things. She had all sorts of UFO sightings. She was describing these sightings that she had. It was an incredible thing. So that's the other thing you get with missiles is you always get experiencers involved. For example, with the famous one at Malmstrom Air Force Base, and I made the joke, and people didn't think it was very funny that Salas, who was in the silo at the time, he was down below when the 9 nuclear missiles were shut down or 10 nuclear missiles were shut down. He's an experiencer. He's been his whole life of the experiences. And I said, hey, that's kind of like the Russians. They had one of their own guys in the missile silo to run it. And it was, you see this deal that people have you find out they're experiencers and you only find that out by asking them a lot of questions. And you find out that their connection is a little bit stronger. That I firmly believe that most UFO sightings really are not random.
Well, Grant, I hate to jump in, but I want to direct you into this thought right now about the randomness, because I don't think it's random. I personally do think there's, maybe there's the occasional random thing, but I feel in a way that people are pre-selected. And then after their experience, they are, it's like they're waking us up one by one and we have a mission and it's to communicate what's going on. So we've only got like 5 minutes before we go to break, but can you just quickly talk about that?
Yeah, I always go to that with experiencers because I'll go to experiencers and they'll say, oh, I don't think it's abducted. I just have some dreams about them. And I say, oh, okay. And then I go, anything else weird happened in your life? They go, oh yeah. And they start ghost when I was a kid and they start going through and it's the old deal. Like the idea is that when you've had a UFO experience, you're a lifer. And you, if you haven't seen a UFO till you're 20, and you definitely haven't seen a UFO, they couldn't care less about you. They want kids when they're very young. And the idea behind that to me is, number one, it's a soul contact idea. The idea that you've agreed to this whole thing, and that they pick kids when they're very young. And people say, how could they pick these young kids? And the idea is you get kids before they've got all the garbage in their head. Once the kid starts to be 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, he starts to have religious ideas and political ideas and all sorts of nonsense in their head. And there's nothing they can do with these people. So they get kids when they're young, and that's when they're trained. And I get numerous kids, I'll say, what happened when you were young? And they'll tell the story. We were in a circle. We were sitting in the craft, and I couldn't see the beings. I could only see their legs. And there was a bunch of kids, and they were teaching us to levitate these balls and stuff. And you hear these constant stories about these kids being involved. So to me, you're always a lifer. In my experience, when I saw the UFO, I saw it started in February of 1975. And I said to my friend, I said, let's go and see what they're looking at. And the only reason I was interested, I was not interested in UFOs. I was only interested because I wondered, what's everybody looking at? It's only 30 miles. Why don't we go look and see what they're looking at? And my friend said, yeah, okay, we'll go. We'll go there. And he had the car, so I couldn't really do anything. We didn't go. We didn't go for 3 months. And it was at that point when CKY TV got this thing jumping from the ground to 5,000 feet in the air in 3 frames of film. And when I saw that, and they played this thing over and over again, they had a little presentation on the TV. I said, come on, let's go. Let's go start looking at it. And we went out there and I was looking around, and we saw it. To make a long story short, when the thing was all over and I started to write the book, I went to the guy who actually got that film. And I said to him what was happening. And what happened was the assistant producer had said, no more UFOs. You guys nobody's going out for these stupid UFOs. If you guys want to go and chase these stupid UFOs, you can go on your own time. And they put a volunteer crew of reporters, and the guy who shot the film had never shot a TV camera in his life. He was a film editor, and he was standing there, and they were way down the road, 8 miles down the road, and this thing jumped up in the air. And what happened was he was looking at it, and he said, oh, they got something the night before. And I said, man, I got to get something on film. So the next time this thing flares up, I was sitting on the ground, it was going up and it was going down. He said, next time it flares up, I'm going to jump. It was almost like the UFO said, are you ready to push the trigger? Get ready. And he pushed the trigger and this thing jumped in the air. And when he told me that, I said, this wasn't random. This didn't happen, because I never would have gone. Into that film. And it was almost like I didn't go the first month. So they had to have this thing where they got caught on the ground to get me to go out there. And from then on, I've asked people, do you have a mission? And people say, yeah, well, I think so. And a lot of people really don't know what it is. And a lot of people say, yeah, I got a mission and I know what it is. And you go to that thing and people will know that something is unusual. Once you have the UFO sighting, you're down the rabbit hole and you can't get out. We have these people would say, oh, the guy's left. He's never coming back. I go, yeah, right. Come on. Everybody comes back. Nobody leaves. I mean, everybody's here for life. And that's what you see is this obsession where people get divorced and they can't. It's almost like near-death experiences. People have near-death experience. 75 to 80% of them get divorced. It's the same as the UFO thing. It's so traumatic. People said one sighting. It's 1966. And I'll say, tell me about it. At exactly what time of the day, exactly. It's like it happened yesterday, because it affects people's lives. And that's what I think is happening. We're being influenced by whatever this is, this intelligence, I call it. And I think a lot of it is absolutely purposeful. They're just playing with us. They're playing these games, dropping metal. They're doing all this weird stuff. And it's to drag us down the rabbit hole, because they don't want to come in and say, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. They're giving you little breadcrumbs that lead you down the road, and they want us to figure it out.
Right. Is that what your book Contact Modalities is about? And I want to we only have a few minutes to the break. So maybe do a little short intro on that, and then we'll dive into that deeper on the other side of the break. Okay.
Well, Contact Modalities is a book that was very popular. A lot of people picked it up. A lot of contactee groups were using it. And basically what it says is what happened to me is I had my sighting, and a week later, Ray Hernandez of Free, who started the whole thing with all the Edgar Mitchell and stuff, he had his dog sighting the week after. And Chris Bledsoe had his experience either the same day as me or a couple of weeks after. And I don't think this was coincidence. So Ray has his experience. And so he says to me, and he has this contact where he says to his, that if you're there, come on down. And this big thing appears, and he goes, holy cow, I can contact this thing. So he goes on the internet, he puts contactee or consciousness in UFOs, and my name comes up. So I said, okay, I'll meet you down in Florida, and you can I'll give you I'm doing a lecture on consciousness, and we can talk. So I give the lecture 2 days after he's on the freeway in Miami, and he gets pulled, and he gets pulled into the air in this sort of experience where they have the wheel and they say it's all the same thing. It's just all contact modalities. That's where the idea comes from, and that's the idea that there's a field and everything is in the field, and it's the ability to get in the field. And there are 70 different ways in the book that I describe of how to get into the field. And so we can do that after the break if you want.
Yeah. And does that have to do with, I'm sorry, guys, I just have a quick question. Does that have to do with like synchronicities and manifesting and things like that? Do you notice that with contactees?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm writing a book. Like the one book that's coming out next is on ports. But the ports will appear across the line. So it'll happen to psychics, physical mediums, UFO people. Like I'll say to UFO people, I'll say, hey, you ever have anything fall out of the ceiling or move around? And the guy goes, hang on, I'm going next room. He goes next room. He never had any idea. He had this whole collection of stuff that appeared and disappeared and all this sort of stuff. He didn't know what it meant. And he had to go and get it. And what you'll do is if you ask people, experiencers, a lot of them will tell you these stories. They've never told them because they don't believe it's related. So that's that. But contact modalities is basically like psychics and people who are intuitive and experiencers. And it's basically you're getting material from the field. Inventions are coming from the field. Music is coming from the field. And that's what contact modalities is all about. I look at all these different ways of getting in the field, getting material, bringing it back, and winning Nobel Prizes or singing songs or whatever it is.
I love this.
I do too. And that reminds me of your picture falling off the wall and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
It might have been Angelia saying hey to you, but so much of this is just, that's what I said.
It's resonating with me already.
It's resonating. Yeah, it's resonating. And I know when you were in Colorado speaking, it resonated with me on such a level. I was like, holy cow. So anyway, I would love to hear more about, how you get into this, how you get that into the modalities and that after the break. I think we want to mention your website. We have just a couple seconds. So you do have a website. It is called It's All Connected Publishing, correct? .com?
Yeah, if you put that into a Google search, that will take you there. I used to have the presidential site, but I took it down and I've got all the material. Eventually, I'll either build another website or put it in a book.
All right. Well, perfect. All right. We'll dig deeper into this after the break. We'll see you soon. Hang in there.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
MUFON is the voice of thousands of like-minded people who want to see change. We speak up against UFO secrecy. We engage governments and agencies around the world on the topic. We share information with the public through our journal, website, newsletter, social media, and even our own TV channel. When you join MUFON, you add your voice to the cause. Few things are more important in our time than understanding the UFO question. Join MUFON. Find your friends.
Hi, I'm Austin Butler from Baz Luhrmann's new film, Elvis.
Tomorrow, all of America will be talking about Elvis Presley.
As a blood donor himself, Elvis shared the gift of life with patients in need and asked others to do the same. We're encouraging you to give blood this summer. Please visit redcrossblood.org/Elvis movie today to learn more.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, You are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected. Only at kgradb.com.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're back with the MUFON What's Up show with Grant Cameron. An amazing first hour. And we got another hour with the man who, I tell you, is probably one of the top ufologists in the world. And Grant, I got to start off with this because I've been itching to, I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm going to say a word. And I want you to blow it out of there. Disclosure.
Okay. Disclosure. I've written a couple books about it. I'm one of the people who believes that the government has been dropping this thing since the 1950s through Walt Disney. I was good friends with Bob Emenegger during the 1970s, and people will say, I know Chris Mellon says the idea that they're sprinkling this stuff out is total nonsense. And I say, well, then explain Bob Emenegger. Bob Emenegger was a producer in LA with Alan Sandler, and Bob was no believer in UFOs. And he said one day, Alan phones me up. He says, we got to go to Norton Air Force Base, and they want to talk to us. They got some films they want to do. So they went there, and they talked to Paul Scharble, who was the security manager at Norton Air Force Base at DAVA, which is the the aerial aviation film. So it was all the film from the military went to DAVA at Norton Air Force Base. So the head of security says, oh, we want you to do a film. We have the Vietnam War, and we want to increase the likability of the military after the Vietnam War. So we'd like you to do all these different documentaries. And one was on 3D holography. One was on working with dolphins. One was on working with dogs. One was on computer technology and stuff like that. We want you, and they 8 documentaries. And Bob says, okay, fine, we'll do this documentary. And they went through, and then they said, oh, we'd like you to do this documentary on UFOs, and we'd like you to hide it under the other documentaries. You'll get $250,000 from the MacArthur Foundation, but we would rather you not put MacArthur's name on the end of the film. You would rather his name not be associated with it, but you got $250,000 to do a documentary. So Bob is going, UFOs, what do you mean UFOs? And he said, what would you say if I told you that we had a landing of a UFO at Holloman Air Force Base in May of 1971, and that it was all filmed from 3 different vantage points, and we can give you that film to end your documentary? And Bob is going, what are you talking about? Because he used to tell his wife, she's reading the National Enquirer, and he'd say, Margaret, will you keep reading that garbage about the alien had my baby? I mean, this is crazy. And suddenly this security manager is telling him this stuff's for real. And he talked about how they would go into the Pentagon and not even sign in. They could walk right into the Pentagon. They had these meetings with Bill Coleman, who was the head of information for U.S. Air Force at the time when Blue Book was after it was finished. He was the spokesman, and he said to them, you can if you get the classified stuff, you could go into jail and all this kind of stuff. And he was giving these warnings. And they actually put a thing in the documentary about. If you look at the documentary, it's on the internet. It's UFOs that has begun. If you run that, you'll see the documentary. It was redone in 1979 under that name. But anyway, they were given the film. They had this film from Holloman Air Force Base, and they were going to put it in the end of the film. And they were given a story about the CIA channeling an alien. And I've actually got the documents from this now. Channeling an alien at the National Photographic Interpretation Center, which was the top CIA building in Washington, where they analyzed all the all the SR-71 photos and stuff like that. They were in this building, and they all these CIA people were in there, and they channeled an alien, and the ship flew by the window, and it was all witnessed. And Robert Friend goes on the documentary and describes this whole thing. So anyway, you have this whole story where Bob is told this stuff, and then Bob tells the story. They put it out, and at the last minute, they pull the documentary. They say, or the Holloman Air Force Base film, and they say, "Oh, we can't give it to you. The time isn't right. The Vietnam War, yada yada yada." And then at the end, I found out they had 8 seconds. So I contacted Bob back, and I said, "Bob, there's 8 seconds of the Holloman film inside your documentary," and he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Bob, you told me you took it back to the Pentagon. You told me a story about these people in a Datsun, and they were driving these giant people in a Datsun, and they had to drive across the country with this film canister in the back seat." And he said, "Well, yeah." I said, "But Bob, there's 8 seconds of film in there." He said, "Oh, well, it doesn't show anything." I said, "Is that from the film?" "Well, yeah." He said, "But it doesn't show anything." And I said, "What do you mean it doesn't show anything?" "Well, it doesn't show the bodies, it doesn't show the aliens, and it doesn't show the craft up close. So they allowed us to use it." So it was that thing. And then he said in 1983 under Reagan, he said they got called back, and they had to go back to Norton again. And then Paul Chartle says, "Oh, the government liked what you did in the 1970s, and they'd like you to do another documentary." And the first question came out of Bob Eminger's mouth. He said, "Is this Ronald Reagan doing this?" And they said they wouldn't answer the question. And they had a general there who actually, Hynek was on the base. They wanted Hynek and Vallée involved. They had Hynek on the base at Dava, and the general says, "Okay, Chartle, get all the UFO film, pull it out and give it to Hynek." And he said, "Sorry, General, I can't do that." And he said, "God damn, I'll have your I'm telling you, get that film and give it to Hynek." He said, "Sorry, General, you'll have to have a record. You have to give a requisition for that. I can't just pull the film." And Hynek and Vallée pulled out. That's what killed the film, because they felt the same thing was going to happen. They were going to get in the film. They're going to get in this documentary. And at the last minute, the government would pull the actual evidence. Vallée used to call it the dangling carrot. And they did this all the time. Even in the latest disclosure thing, if you follow the key people, I say you got to follow the key people we used to call the Avery. Now they're called the Cosmic Club or the Invisible College and stuff. You got to listen to these people, whether you believe these people or not. You've got to listen to these people like Kit Green and Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis and Puthoff and Bigelow and whatever these people say, write everything down, because these people have way more knowledge than you and I. And so I was following these people all the way through. And I know that they had this material. And one of the people now is a new guy. It's Jim Semivan, who had the beings in his room with his wife in the bedroom. And I've heard this whole story of what he saw and what happened and stuff like that. And he has this experience, and he goes to the 3-letter agencies. He said it clearly. "I went to all the tops of the 3-letter agencies, and I said, you guys tried to get this thing out. You can't get it out, so we're gonna drop it, and we're gonna make this thing come out, and we're gonna disclose." And he said all the people on the top of the 3-letter agencies said, "Oh, okay, keep us informed." And in 2016, I wrote the book called Managing Magic, which you have the cover of. Managing Magic, which is the idea that it's not just UFOs. It's why they went to Skinwalker Ranch is because it's more than UFOs. It's ghosts, it's orbs, it's cattle, it's all this stuff. It's all the same thing. That's the whole idea behind contact modalities. That's what Ray Hernandez was told when he was pulled, and they saw the aliens in this wheel going around. They said, "You guys are parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing, whether it's remote viewing or psychic phenomena. It's all the same thing." So in 2016, when I was writing that book, Managing Magic, I was told by Chris Bledsoe clearly, and I made it public in the book, which was published in February of 2017. So that's like almost a year before Tom DeLonge went public. I identified Jim Semivan, that he was one of the people. And I was told in 2016, high-level officials are going to go public, and they are going to say UFOs are real, and they are going to disclose. And what happened? Millen came forward. Kit Green basically came forward. Semivan came forward. Justice came forward. Lou Elizondo came forward. High-level officials who said UFOs are real, and they disclosed. This is all part of to me, of a plan. It's a slow plan, but it's people, and you'll see all the people are retired. So you use retired people to do this thing, and it's people who are interested, who want to push this thing down the road, and they are given access. Which is my big question of how do you get the film out of the Pentagon, which is one of the big things when you look at the disclosure thing. If you look at the whole thing with the Trump thing, is I've done presidential documents, and I know whether they're classified or not classified, you can't just walk into the National Archives and walk out with a bunch of documents. They own all the documents. That's national history. The same thing is the videos that you saw with the 1970 2017 released by the New York Times, the Goes Fast and the Tic Tac video and all that stuff. They came and they said, well, they're declassified. Doesn't matter. How did you get them out of the Pentagon? Somebody had to give you those things out of the Pentagon. That is owned by the U.S. government. You can't just walk out. If you resign in disgust, they don't give you the films to go with your goodbye present. These are classified films that were maybe declassified, but you still can't take them, even if they're declassified. So that was always my question about disclosure. They're saying, well, this just happened. And it's like, no, it didn't just happen. So to me, this is a lot more orchestrated than what you think it is. I'm all for it. I applaud these guys. Move on with the thing. They've got a plan. The latest plan I've heard is that they're going to give immunity. And then I say game over, because I'm the guy with the Wilson leak document. That was my job. I was told to put the Wilson leak document, get it onto the internet. I got it onto the internet. It's now been read into Congress. And all this stuff about the legacy programs and the fact that they had crash saucer, and in the Wilson document they say we have a craft, we think it'll fly, which basically means they got a craft, they can't turn it on because it's got a business interface. Can't turn the thing on. So what's going to happen now is you're going to see this disclosure, and once they give immunity to witnesses, I say all you need is Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff to be called. And it's game, set, match. It's over. You're going to learn everything that's going on, and it's going to be all over. And I'm the guy that said at one point, there's never going to be disclosure. I've been this since 1975. I said 2042 one time when at a conference, Steve asked me, when's it going to be disclosure? I said 2042. I never believed there would be disclosure. When I saw the New York Times thing break and how fast it flipped, it was almost like gay marriage. It was like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, UFOs exist. Nobody jumped off a building. Nobody committed suicide. Nothing happened. Everybody just said, oh, yeah, okay, UFOs exist. Okay, where are they at? Where are they coming from?
Exactly.
That's the next step, and that's the next step that's going to come. And I'm the first guy now to say this could happen next week. All they need is this immunity, and you need one guy like Eric Davis or Hal Puthoff to go up there, and it's over.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Speaking of government, Greer is one of those people that's always said, I think the government can absolutely fake an abduction. That somebody could have had what they think is an abduction. It was, all military. What are your thoughts on that? Is that really possible?
No, I'm one of the guys that believes they really don't. I'm one of the guys that says the way Jim Semivan describes it. Not only do they not have can they not connect the dots? They don't even have the dots. He said there does not appear to be any there. This has got something to do with consciousness and other dimensions. That's my final conclusion, is that they have the crafts, and they basically there was what was known as the core story. If you know that whole story, there was Hal Puthoff, Kit Green from the CIA, and Jacques Vallée got together at a Denny's restaurant. And they've confirmed this story. Yeah, the Denny's restaurant story is true. So they went to the Denny's restaurant and they said, there's all this garbage floating around the UFO. And I think this is 1982. They said, there's all these garbage stories floating around. Like you had the one with Schneider at the beginning. And people say, all these stories, are they true? I mean, these people in Antarctica, what the hell's going on? And they came up, and these were guys, I call them the Avery guys. These are guys who have been in it. They have classified information. They've talked to people. I've heard some of the stories behind it. They know exactly what's going on. They can name the 12 people that are running the show. They know what's going on, some of these people. And so they said, what do we know for sure? And what they came to is what's been called the core story. And the core story is we're being interacted with something. Something is interacting with us, and it's not Russian. It's not Chinese. It's something real. UFOs are real. Number 2, we've got recovered hardware. Number 3, we can't back engineer it. We're not doing a very good job back engineering. If you've heard Eric Davis talk about it, and we talked before about Lazar, he said, the Lazar story is absolute garbage. They're not even keeping the stuff at Area 51. And I remember when George Knapp was doing the interview, and George Knapp said, oh, I know what the headline for tomorrow morning is. And he made a mistake. He said the crash material is not at Area 51. And Eric Davis had also said, if you listen carefully, he had said every 7 or 8 years, they pull it down, they take a look at it, and still can't figure it out, and then they put it back on the shelf again. I say that this is really advanced. If you take some of the stories that I've got a book coming out called the UFO Sky Pilots. And in that book, I talk with 36 plus people who claim they've flown the craft. And every one of them will tell you the same thing. I remember, I'll tell you, for example, I had a guy, I was giving a lecture to MUFON Orange County. And after you go to the restaurant, we're sitting in the restaurant, and this guy comes in and they say, hey, David, should have been there. Graham's talking about flying the flying saucer. Tell him about your story about flying the flying saucer. And I said to David, I said, hey, do you fly a flying saucer? He said, yeah, but I think it was a dream. I said, well, everybody thinks it's a dream. Sit down and tell me your story about flying the flying saucer. And then someone says, David, tell me you're a pilot. I said, oh, you're a pilot? My father's a pilot. My son's a pilot. I said, what do you fly? He said, oh, I flew F4s. I flew F-16s. And I went, you flew F-16s? Like, where do you work? He said, oh, I'm a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. I flew in Iraq and stuff. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. I said, tell me your story about flying the UFO. Tell me the story. I think it was a dream. I said, everybody thinks it's a dream. Just tell me your story. And it's like they're reading off a cue card. You go into the craft. He says, I go into the craft, and there's somebody behind me. I don't know if it was the left or right side, but there seems to be people behind me. I don't know if they're aliens or if they're human beings. And I'm standing there in the middle of the craft, and they say to me, go ahead and do it. And I say, I don't know what to do. And they say, you know what to do, just do it. And he says, there's a panel board on the side of the craft. And he goes and he puts his hand on this panel, the panel on the side of the craft. Everybody says the same thing. I put my hand on a panel. I put my hand on a ball. I put my hand on a panel on the wall. Everybody says the same thing. And when he touched the craft, when he touched the panel, everybody says the same thing. I suddenly realized the craft is alive. And I became one with the craft. Whatever I thought was what the craft did. And I could do whatever I wanted. So this guy says, I couldn't believe it. It's like I'm flying the F-16. Suddenly this thing is flying, and he says he takes one hand off the panel, and he's waiting for the thing to stall, and he's going to put it back down to get this thing to go again. And he takes the hand off, and he's going, what? He's still flying the craft. Whatever he's thinking is where the craft is going. And then he takes the other hand, but he leaves it about 6 inches above the panel so he can slam it down on top of the panel. And he says, I've got both my hands off the panel now. And he says, I'm flying the craft, and it does whatever I want. And you have stories, for example, Ron Johnson, whose book is about to come out, one of the best contactee stories there is. He lives right outside of the Skinwalker Ranch. He's researched UFOs, paranormal phenomena for his whole life. So his experiences started about my time, his recalled experiences. And he tells the story of flying the craft, and he's sitting in this chair, and he puts his hands. Some people talk about this chair, and it fits you as if it was built for you. And you have these two little holes. You put your two little fingers in the holes of the side of the chair. And then they say, where would you like to go? And he said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. And they said, okay, hang on. You just sit in the chair. And he said, it's going to be 1 second of intense G-force. And get ready. So he says it was absolutely intense. It's G-force for 1 second. He said, I looked out the window, and there in the distance was the Milky Way. So that would be 50 to 100,000 light years that he traveled in 1 second. Anybody tells me the U.S. Air Force has got that, they ain't got that. They ain't got anything. That's what Jimmy Vance saying. Not only do they not have the connect the dots, they don't even have the dots. And that's the thing. It's this consciousness interface thing to it, where they can appear as whatever it wants. Like I talk about sightings. When I had my sightings back in 1975, I had two of them where it started as one object, and when it actually arrived to me, it was a totally different object. The one was a giant arc welding light that came, and it turned out it was a giant triangle right above the car, sat above the car. It was one object, and it turned into another object. And that's what people will describe. And so people say, we got this technology. I say, really? Hal Puthoff talks about this. If you've ever interviewed Chris Bledsoe, or if you've ever interviewed, his name is escaping me now. Anyway, there's a number of people who will describe this. You go inside the craft and you go, what the heck's going on here? And you look inside the craft, and then you go outside, the craft's 30 feet across, and you go inside, it's the size of a football stadium on the inside. You look outside, it's 30 feet across. And Hal Puthoff even talks about this. Hal said, I'd like to figure out how they do this. And I've heard one person say that actually on the ground, the ones that they've got recovered, it's the same thing. When they're on the outside of the craft, it's one size. When they go in, it's a different size. And they one experiencer said he was told they can make it as big as they want to make it. And so we have that technology. There's no way. And that's when you get into this idea of consciousness technology. For example, Betty Andreasson talks about this, where she's taken on these trips. And there were 6 books. She was one of the most famous experiencers. She was taking all these trips and showing all this stuff. She comes back in a glass orb, same as Chris Bledsoe. She's brought back in this glass orb, and she lands in the backyard. And she says, oh, great, I'm home. I go run to the trailer. And she says, I'm so glad to be back home. And my husband is there sleeping. And I go into the room, and she said, I looked, I'm sitting on the side of the bed. And then she says, so I got back in my body and got back into the bed. And you start getting this kind of stuff is when you start to look is this out of body? Is this a real experience? How many people have ever seen anybody being abducted? If you look, it's like nobody. There's no cases of anybody except maybe Travis Walton, where you see, and he not even nowadays saw him being abducted. You start to see this and you start wondering what it is, or you start talking to people. I wrote a book on psilocybin. I did a whole experiment, 25 sessions, high def sessions with psilocybin to see if I could get in the field. And I was talking to people who are doing DMT, and one of the guys is an artificial intelligence guy. He phones me, the one guy, he says, Grant, I had the DMT, and he said, I had an abduction experience. I said, really? And I heard this, like DMT, half of the people who do the DMT see beings, and 25% of them have the abduction experience. I said, you had the abduction experience? Tell me about it. And he said, yeah, it was on the table. And he said, the beings were there and they were around the table. And I said, he couldn't see their faces, but I could see their arms, and they were working on my brain. And you see that in the abduction experiences. And this guy is on a bed. He's for 10 minutes under DMT, and he has the abduction experience. And he said it was real as the real world. So you get that kind of stuff, and you start to wonder what's really going on.
Right. Is this one of the modalities? I kind of wanted to get back into the modalities. So can we talk about some of those? Yeah. Yeah.
The idea of the modalities is I explain it as right brain, left brain. So you have the male right brain, the male left brain, female right brain. And we're living in a world where it's left brain. It's all fighting, urinating contests, survival of the fittest, all this kind of stuff. And the idea of family, we're all family. We like the mother. We all want to be a family, want to love, and all that stuff is gone. It's by the wayside. And what the contact modalities is the ability to shut the left brain down. That the idea is that the field, everything is in the field. And if you get this idea of there is no time and space, this idea. And so I say, if that's really true, how big is the universe? If there's no time and space, how big is the universe? It's like a dot. And that's when you get the whole idea of this. A lot of people will talk about the Maya, and Greer talks about this. He says, the Sufi expression, you see yourself as a puny form when within you, the entire universe is enfolded. And that's the new idea that I go to, that in out-of-body experience, people will tell you that you don't go out of your body, you go inside, you go internal, that everything is inside you. And that's the idea. Everything's inside you. Everything's in the field. All the inventions are in the field. Everything is there. All the music is there. And it's the ability to shut down the left brain, the male left brain, because you have the signal. And the signal is coming in, but the left brain is causing this noise that you can't hear the signal. So what you do is, like in hypnosis, what are you doing? They say you're quieting the mind. You're not. You're quieting the left brain. You're telling the left brain, oh, we appreciate what you're doing here. We understand what you're doing, and I know you're trying to help, but could you please go for coffee? We're busy here. And the left brain quietens down, and it becomes quiet. And once you can quiet the brain, then the hypnosis takes place. The same thing as the other modalities, like psychics will talk about getting in the zone where they shut down, and it's the idea you got to quiet that left side. And once you quiet the left side, then you can pick up the signal. And some people, it's almost like music. Some people can play a musical note. Some people are musicians, like professional musicians. And same with psychics. Like it's your ability, how far can you get in the field? How can you do it? So you have varying abilities. So the modalities are like hypnosis, regression, music is one. You can shut the brain down using music. And most people don't know this. Most musicians, we've got Nashville here. They may correct me, but most musicians cannot read and write music. The Beatles could not read and write music. Neither could the Stones. No jazz was written. All the blues was written with no music. And all musicians are right-brained. And that's why I wrote a book called Tuned In, The Paranormal World of Music. And I go through the number of musicians who are experiencers. It's incredible. At one point I said, I think they got them all. I think they got every single one, every single musician. Because what I did was I saw this pattern, and it's usually the lead singer who's the guy. So what I did is I come from Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is, like I said, it's famous for being the one place in Canada where even Canadians don't want to visit. It's the coldest major city in the world, but it's famous for a lot of famous musicians came from here. And one of the ones was the Guess Who produced American Woman that the Nixon said would not be sung Nixon's wife wanted it sung in the White House, and Nixon said this will not be sung in the White House. And this famous song that they outsold the Beatles in Canada for about 2 years. and their lead singer, I looked up. Now I forget his name is going to escape me. Burton Cummings. So I saw this pattern and I said, I wonder if Burton Cummings was abducted. So hey, Burton Cummings, alien abduction. I put it into a Google search and it popped up his Facebook. And he says, he's writing in capitals. He said, I'm 64 years old. I'll say whatever I want to say. People are mistreating Whitley Strieber. They're treating him like he's a Scientologist. I know how Whitley Strieber feels. And I'm going, like, how many of his people are going to know who Whitley Strieber is? And I'm going, holy cow, he's been abducted. And I started to get this idea. And you see this idea, or the idea that when I got involved, you see these synchronicities. Chris Bledsoe phones me up about music. And he says, I got a message to you from the Guardians. I've gotten actually messages from 3 different alien groups that wanted to give me a message. One was from Chris Bledsoe. He said, and I had a very bizarre experience at his house, which I don't know if you know about, but extremely one of the most bizarre things I ever had in my life. So I knew Chris was the real deal. So when he said, oh, I got a message from the Guardians, I said, you do? So what's the message? He said, oh, they want you to know the messages in the music. And I said, well, Chris, you may be talking to the wrong guy. I don't listen to music. I'm a radio talk guy. My whole family my mother's a church organist for 40 years. My father built theater organs. My sisters were in a group, but I don't play music. No, I have no interest in music whatsoever. And he says, well, you should listen to Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. I go, whatever. And he's going on. And then he says, and the other song you should listen to is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And I go, Neil Young is involved in this alien thing? And he said, yeah. I said, Neil Young grew up in Winnipeg. And I go, holy cow. So I looked into it. And the song he gave me it's the song After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And if you get the lyrics, he's sitting in a bombed out basement and the silver seeds come and they take the chosen ones to another planet. And if you read the book by Yvonne Smith called The Chosen ones are taken to another planet. And it's this time of reckoning that a lot of experiencers talk about. And I go, holy cow. And then I started to realize that all these experiencers, Patti Smith, and I can't remember the names of all the bands, but I list them all. There's about 10 major musicians who went and sang After the Gold Rush. And I go, they're singing this. They don't know what's going on, but they're singing this song and they're all singing the song. And I started going through these musicians and it was just incredible. But it's the same idea that musicians are very right-brained. And left-brain music is practice, read. Right-brain music is you sit there and you say, okay, wait for a song, and you wait for the song, and all of a sudden, it comes, and you grab it, and you start to play with it, and then it stops, and that's how it comes. Like same as channeling. Where does channeling come from?
Channeling.
Channelers is coming from that field. They're able to shut down this left brain and pick it up, and so that's what modalities is. And I go through all these 70 modalities. And the idea is you've got to link them all together. All the psychic stuff is connected. So when you see the Skinwalker Ranch, when you see the $22 million spent by the U.S. government, they were not spending it on UFOs. There may have been a little money on UFOs. They couldn't care less. They wanted to know, for example, Skinwalker Ranch, the one story about the bulls, if you know the story about the bulls, the guy, they're doing all this weird stuff, and he says, oh, don't touch my bulls. And he goes running out of the house, and the bulls are gone. And he's got these 4 prize bulls that are worth like $15,000 each or whatever. And he's going, holy cow, they got the bulls. And he's looking around and he sees the trailer. And immediately he sees the trailer and it's got a lock on. He says, wonder if they put him inside the trailer. And he opens the trailer and these things are packed in as tight as can be inside the trailer. And as soon as he opens the door, they go nuts and they break this trailer apart and stuff like that. And that's what the Defense Intelligence Agency wanted to do, is how do you put bulls in a trailer through metal? If we could do that, man, that would be really cool. And the other big one that they had was this thing about telepathy, which is like the contact modality where you're not really reading somebody's mind. Everybody's mind is in the field. You just go in there and you find the person's mind and you can go around and pick up whatever you want. So there was this telepathy thing. If you know the story, you see the Skinwalker thing where they talk about this, the hitchhiker. Anybody who's done paranormal phenomena knows that hitchhiker is all paranormal phenomena. You can go through ghosts. And if you don't protect yourself, if you don't shield yourself, you're going to carry this thing around with you if you pick it up. So what they did was they had the one experience where they were, these 3 guys were special forces guys, were hunting the Skinwalker. They were there and they'd been brought in by Defense Intelligence Agency and they were armed. And they were going down this road. And that's where I say, when you start looking at UFOs, you start asking, do people have guns? Were they shooting at the UFO? And these guys had guns, and they were special forces guys. They were tough guys that weren't scared of anything. And in the book that says they were stopped by this cold field. They went in, it got cold, and they went out, it went 20 degrees up. They went inside the field. The thing they missed was the part of the story they left out was they had a voice in their head, all three guys, that said, leave, you are not welcome. And these guys freaked out. They took this thing home with them, and that's what they were looking for, is how do we get inside someone's head? If we could get inside Putin's head, that would be great. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for this paranormal phenomena stuff, the Apport stuff, all that kind of stuff. That's why they spent $22 million, was to try to get the technology that is at Skinwalker Ranch. Because if you can figure out how to do the stuff at Skinwalker Ranch, that's the kind of stuff the military would like to have.
Yeah.
Is the government aware of contactees or people that are in this field? And are they tracking them? And
Chris
they're aware
Bledsoe
of them.
talks
Is
about
that
that
part
all
of
the
the
time.
Havana? Is that part of the Havana syndrome? Is that all connected? And they're tracking certain people, certain individuals.
Well, they've started. I give them credit that they're actually looking at experiences. I've said for years, and until you talk to the people who are talking to the intelligence, you're not going anywhere. I mean, you can look at lights in the sky till the cows come home, and you can talk about colors and whatever. It's not until you talk to people who are talking to the people inside the craft, and you can believe them, disbelieve them, but at least talk to them. And you start getting these stories, and you start finding out, for example, Chris Bledsoe, who I had this experience with the dog. I don't know if you know the story about the dog, where they were letting the dogs out the front door. And I'm thinking, the dogs kept coming in and the door is open. It happened 3 times. Once when I was there, 2 times when I went to Florida, I'm coming back. And I said, they left the door open. I'm thinking, Chris Bledsoe let the door open. And the next time I come, it's almost like the beings were saying, you weren't impressed with the dogs being left out of the front door? Watch this. So we're going, and we're coming in the house with the dog, this Nellie, the black lab. And we're going into the house, and Chris is on the one side. I'm in the mid. The dog comes on my left side. So I'm there. Chris is there. The dog comes in. He's trying, dogs want to get in the house before you. So the dog goes running by me, and I hear Chris go, Nellie, what happened? What happened, Nellie? And I look, and the dog is there, and the blood is shooting out the dog's neck. And all over the walls, all over the floor. And I go, and when they were letting the dogs out the front door, I thought, you're letting the door open. I had the cat. I said, this is weird. I run in the car, get the camera. I start filming this thing. The dog is lying on the front step. Chris has got his hand on top of this dog. And I look at my pants later, and the blood is, Del Milne had the blood all over my pants. And I thought, I'm going to keep these pants. They're famous. And about a month, 2 months later, I washed them. Not a single drop of blood. It was like nothing happened. But anyway, so I had that experience with him. So I knew it was real. And then he started telling me these stories that the government was watching him, that NASA had made him the official spokesman for NASA to the intelligence. He's seeing what's called a lady. You'll hear about it with the Fatima, or what's I think with the girls in 1911 or whatever, the religious experience. This woman keeps reappearing. And they realized that this woman is part of this experience. So Chris saw this woman, and she told him, Chris, you have a burden, and it is yours to carry. I said to Chris, do you know what the burden is? He said, yeah, I know what the burden is. The burden is the message. I've been told to carry this message. So this woman gives him this message, and he has around his house all the time. He's filming every night. He's filming like hundreds of videos a night. He's got special cameras have been given to him and stuff like that. And so the CIA is there, Defense Intelligence is there. I said to him, do you ever tell anybody, because he flew the craft. I said, did you ever tell anybody that you flew the craft? Did they ever ask you? He said, I had a general, U.S. Air Force general asked me. I explained to him how do you fly the craft. Same thing. You put a hand on the panel, all this sort of stuff, and window opens up and he's flying the craft and stuff like that. So anyway, he told me all these people are watching him. And then he said to them, why are you guys here? Why are you watching me? Like, how come you're here? And he said, we found out they don't really want to talk to us. And it appears they're talking to you. So we'd like to know what's going on. That's exactly what they told him. And that's where Jim Semivan came from. Jim Semivan was an experiencer. And so he went to see Chris Bledsoe, and he became friends with, he goes to every birthday party of Chris Bledsoe. Jim Semivan from the CIA is there because he knows Chris Bledsoe is the real deal. And so you get that. And the other thing that Ron Pandolfi, who I'd been chasing all the time for the portal thing, I got that he had said, because we cannot control the phenomena, we have to follow those who the phenomena affects. It makes sense. If you can't interact with the phenomena, you follow, because there's a lot of these people walking around who are having these experiences, and what they do is they go to them and they try to figure out, why are they coming to Chris Bledsoe? Why is he seeing it? What's the deal? And they actually put the monitors. The CIA was going to put monitors there, and they didn't let somebody know, and Chris found out, and Chris pulled all the monitors. So they were actually going to set up with part of this new program, this defense program. They were going to put monitoring devices around Chris Bledsoe's house because he has so many experiences. They have experiences that I haven't seen the photo yet. But they have experiences with Jim Semivan from the CIA at this tree, this famous burning tree that was there that burned one night 3 times in 6 hours. Bizarre story. And he's standing at the tree, and there's all these orbs around Jim Semivan. So some of these photos come out, and Jim Semivan will tell you, no, this guy's the real deal. And he was offered a film deal by Warner Brothers. They were going to have Julia Roberts play in the film. They were going to have the guy who did Signs and did Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson wanted to play Chris Bledsoe. And then I immediately said, really? And you're going to have Julia Roberts? I said, who's playing me in the film? Because they're going to be in the film, this story about the dog. Because he said at first, he said to me, well, I think that's another experience that people will talk about. They'll talk about the shadow people. And they'll say, oh, these shadow people, these evil shadow people. And Chris gave me at the beginning, he said, I think the shadow people cut the dog. I said, no, what do you think? Why would you think the shadow people cut the dog? He said they were dark. I said, well, because they're dark doesn't mean they're evil. And I said, you know what I think happened? They wanted this thing in the movie. And then he said, no, I don't think so. I said, yeah, Chris, they want this in the movie because they were letting the dogs out the front door. And I wasn't impressed at all at the dogs. And they said, watch this. And they did this thing with my pants where there's blood on my pants and the dog is bleeding and stuff like that. And that's where Chris learned to heal. He's a healer. He put his hand, that was when he started healing. He healed somebody when I was in Maine. He healed some woman of deafness. I could not believe it in front of my eyes. And so that's the first time he was able to heal, where he stopped his bleeding on the dog. And he said, no, I don't think that's why. I said, yeah, they wanted this thing in the movie. And then a couple of weeks later, he said, have you still got those photographs from Nellie when that thing happened to Nellie? And I said, yeah, Warner Brothers would like them. So this is going to be in the movie. And that's what Warner Brothers wants. They want to play these real elaborate things. That's what I believe they're doing. So whether it's medals, I've just got a medal case today, a medal raining down on some woman. And we've got the pieces. We've got the story. The book is just being finished. My assistant edited the book. And that's how I found out about it. I said, I want to do an interview with this girl. So this will be public in the next couple of weeks. But that kind of stuff where people will say, and I even asked Jacques Vallée, like you have these metal pieces and everybody's going, oh, look at a piece of metal. And the isotopes are different. And everybody's all excited. And it's like, holy cow. And they're not made here and stuff. And I go, they're dropping the stuff. I said to Hal Puthoff, I said, Hal, come on, Hal. This is Apport. They're dropping this stuff on purpose. Like they came across the galaxy and avoided galaxies and stars and black holes. And they got here and then little pieces started falling off. Come on. They're dropping this stuff on purpose. They just want you to go, holy cow, what the hell's going on? People are getting all excited. And that's what it is. Building. And I call it the theory of wow. They just want you to go, wow. They want you to see the UFO because I'll ask people, I'll say, did you see the UFO? And then they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, how long was there? He said, it's been there about 10 seconds. And it's like, did it, what was it doing? Wasn't doing anything. And that was what happened to me. That was the question I asked. The second UFOs I saw in 1975. The first night it came across in front of the car, really close, and down in front of the car. And I went, holy cow, I was trying to get out of the car while the car's moving. The second night it came right at us and it made this turn and it flew off into the northeast. And later I was thinking, like, why wouldn't it just go from there to there? Why did it have to come at me and then go around? It was like, because it wanted me to see it. It came right in close to me. And then it made this turn. And I remember as it was flying away, I was like, that could be from another planet. I'm going. And then I'm thinking, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. And we made a joke because we lived right on the Canadian border. And American beer, we used to call it like water. And so Americans are coming to Canada to buy the beer because they had a higher alcohol. So we said, oh, Charlie Red Star, he's coming to get on a beer run. He's getting some beer. He's going back to the United States because he was coming from the nuclear weapons silos. I remember I asked the head guy who was that ran the airport. I said, Bob, why were the UFOs in Carmen? There's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing of any importance. He said, you know why they're here? I said, Bob, I don't know why they're here. He said, I told you in 1975 why they're here. I said, Bob, I don't know. 35 years later, I still don't know why they came to this stupid little town. It has nothing. He said, I told you, missile silos. They were in the missile silos. And suddenly I realized, oh, yeah, we've got like 300 missile silos on the other side of the border. And they were coming from the missile silos. And as soon as they took these missiles out in November of 1975, the UFOs went away. So that's, to me, is a big part of this thing. It's the theory of wow. Like they make crop circles. And everybody goes, holy cow, are they horks? Are they real? And everybody's getting excited and it raises consciousness. It's almost the same as gay marriage or gays. It's like, I ask you, like, when was gay marriage finally accepted? And everybody goes, I don't know, but 20 years ago, maybe it flips. It just flips. And suddenly everybody agrees with it. Nobody's fighting it anymore. And that's what's going to happen here. The same thing happened in 2017 with the UFO article. The UFO article happened and nobody jumped off a bridge. I remember we used to write an article. I wrote an article called The 64 Reasons They've Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. And I had all these things like people are going to commit suicide if they admit UFOs are real. The stock market's going to melt down because everybody's going to realize oil's not worth anything. What happened? And it was wrong. Everything was wrong. It was like, what happened? Nothing. Because the people were acclimatized to the fact that UFOs existed. There's all these stories and stories and stories. And people heard so many stories. And then it was like almost like Max Planck said, the new idea is not moved ahead by arguing with the opponents. It happens because people die and the new generation is not offended by the idea. And that's what it is the new kids come in and the young kids will say, now they'll say, oh yeah, man, there's portals and all this stuff. It's no big deal to them. The old people don't agree with it. So that's what's happening. I think they're doing this thing where they're dropping metals, they're doing crop circles, even ground traces. I say to people, hey, when was the last ground trace? Because we had 10 of them in 1975 in the book. I talk about these ground traces. There has not been a ground trace for 25 years. Stanton Friedman used to talk all the time, the physical metal where it comes down and it leaves marks in the field and stuff like that. Go to Rendlesham Forest and you talk to Peniston, who touched the craft. He tells the story. He said, I hit the thing and it was solid. It wouldn't move. And I'm trying to move this craft and it was solid. It wouldn't move. And he said, I looked under to see what it was and there was no landing gear. But when it left the tripod marks. So why would it leave the tripod marks? Because everybody's going to get out the cement and they're going to make tripod marks. And everybody's going to talk about it, take photographs. That's what they want. They're just raising the consciousness to say you're not alone. Something's going on, and we're going to figure it out ourselves. And people aren't going to be offended. Nobody's going to go crazy. The religious people are going to try to turn them into, baptize them and stuff. Everybody's going to have their own little niche. Everybody will learn to live with it. And I think we're very close to disclosure now. I think we're very close to people realizing, but the thing is going to be different. It's not going to, I don't think it's going to be, the more I look at it, the more I think it's not ET. There's a Russian, an Israeli experiencer who you might want to have on. His name is Yossi Ronin. His book has been in the top 10 for a long time. It's called One. It's the idea that they gave to him. What they told him when they left was they said, when we come into your world, we have to take on a body. And we take on whatever we want, and almost like the contact modalities. You can do the same thing. You just don't realize it. So they have to come in. They have to come into the physical world, take on a body. They can take on whatever they want. And part of what you see, what you believe, is what you're going to see. So they come in and then they exit. It's almost like a radio frequency. It's a frequency. They're on a different frequency. And the way I say to people to understand how this thing is actually happening, and it relates to Leslie Kean, New York Times reporter who wrote the original article. If you read her story of going to the physical seance, and when I interviewed her, everybody else was going to ask these questions. All I want to ask was one question. Leslie, tell me about the hand. Tell me about the arm. Tell me that story. Was that true? Did it actually happen? She's sitting at a physical seance, and she said, I've seen this a number of times. This Stuart Alexander physical seance in England. She said, I've seen it a number of times. Sit at this table. There's a red light underneath the table. She's sitting at this table. And this is Leslie Kean from the New York Times. This water stuff starts coming up on top of the table. She's standing there right at this table. She's looking down, and the water comes, and this hand and arm starts to appear. And it forms into this hand. And she says, it's real hand. She said, I grab it. I hold it. She said, I could feel the knuckles. I could feel the tendons. It was warm. It was like a child. It was soft, like a child's hand. She said, I could feel it. And then she said it was there for a couple of minutes. And then it banged on the table a couple of times and then just went back into this thing and disappeared into this water thing. And that's what the beings are doing. Because when Yossi Ronin told about it, he said, when they left, they were green beings. They looked like grays, except they were green. He said, when they left, they all grabbed hands and they made a circle. And they started this circle, and they started moving around in this circle in his bedroom. They went faster and faster, 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 faster. He said suddenly they became translucent, and then they turned into light. And then the light got smaller, 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 smaller into a little tiny ball, and just went boop. And that's how all the beings disappeared. And that's the thing. So they can pop into our world. They can change the frequency that from their frequency to our frequency. So I don't believe that people say there's dimensions. There's 9 dimensions. There's no 9, nothing. There's no numbers. There's nothing. It's all one thing. It's all alive. There are no nouns. It's all a verb. It's all moving. It's all alive. It's all connected. So they just change the frequency. They come in on our frequency. They materialize and they go back into their frequency. And that's Leslie Kean. That's the prime example to show what's actually happening is Leslie Kean telling that story about the hand that appears and then disappears again.
Grant, I don't know where to start. This is just an absolutely amazing show. But I'm going to ask a curveball here. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I get a lot of stories. People send me in stories and everything. And I get a lot of stories that aliens are a national security threat, that they're hostiles. Yeah. And I even gotten stories that people believe that there's an actual, war going on between certain races and stuff that we're not aware of. Now, that could be garbage. I don't know. But what's your take on this?
Well, I used to talk to Linda Howe was big on this. I knew Linda Howe very well, and I'd always sort of argue this point with her. We'd go for lunch, and I would argue this point with her. And there was this thing about, especially the battle in outer space. And I said, "This makes sense, Leslie. I mean, aliens are telepathic. You know that." And yeah, I know that. And I said, "But okay, so if they're telepathic and they're precognitive, they can tell you what's going to happen in the future, because they see us all the time. That they show people what's going to happen in the future. So if they're telepathic and they can tell what's going to happen in the future, why would you start a war? I mean, how do you sneak up on the guy? That's how war works. You got to sneak up on the guy. But if he's telepathic, he knows you're coming. And when he comes, I mean, everybody knows who's going to lose the war. So if you know in the future that you're going to lose the war, why would you start a war? The idea of aliens making war is crazy with each other. And so one of the examples I use is Linda Howe asked a question to Bashar, who's a channeler, and she asked him the question. She was talking about the evil aliens, and he's going, no. And then she said, okay, so what race should we really be afraid of? And he goes, you. And she said, what do you mean? Me? Yeah. What do you mean? Me personally? She said, no, not you personally, you, the race. And that's what I say to people. So people say, oh, there's evil aliens. And I say, okay, have they dropped an atomic bomb? No. Well, then they're better than us. They're one step higher than us because they've dropped an atomic bomb. I mean, you can't get eviler than dropping an atomic bomb and putting 200,000 people into the sidewalk, innocent civilians. So you get that. And what it is, John Alexander, I've got some notes that people are trying to get me to move. You'll hear about them on Twitter. I've got these notes. So you have the Wilson leak document. The reason I knew the Wilson leak document was real is because I was friends with Eric Davis back when this happened, 2002. And Eric Davis gave me a set of notes from what was called the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group, the UFO working group that John Alexander had started in 1985. And they had 21 people, all with top secret SCI clearances. And what they were trying to do is they're trying to raise money, almost like they're doing right now. They had all these people and they were trying to figure out back engineering, cattle mutilations, triangles, black triangles, all this sort of stuff. And they had these top guys trying to figure out, what do you know about it? And we're all sharing, and they were in a skiff. This is all top secret briefing type stuff. And basically they came to the conclusion that everybody's come to now. UFOs exist, and we have no clue what's going on after that. But anyway, in that thing, John Alexander admitted that they had used the threat, that in order to get money. So you take what's going on now. They're at the Armed Services Committee, which is weapons, and intelligence, which is foreign enemies. So if you want this thing for good purposes and we want to advance science and stuff, you're going to put it in front of the Science and Technology Committee in the House and the Senate. Did it go there? No, nobody's interested. You put it in front of the Armed Services and you put it in front of the Intelligence Committee and you present it as a threat. They did it in 1985 with John Alexander, and they're doing it again. And they know it's really not true. They're saying, it's a potential threat. Well, anything. If you take the U.S. military, you can say anything is a potential threat. They can make anything into a potential threat. And so the idea is that unless you present it as a threat, you're not going to get any money. They couldn't care less. Mm-hmm. It's not in anybody's basket to do UFOs. It's not this guy's job. It's not that. It's never fit into anybody's thing. And if you listen to Semivan, they say they're proactive. The Senate and the House only move on things when things happen. He said the CIA had warned numerous times about a pandemic. Numerous times they had been warned. They had been warned about 9/11 event numerous times. And he said, The Senate and the House never listened to us until it happened. Then when it happened, then suddenly they jumped on, they had commissions and spent a lot of money and stuff. So they only work after the fact. So what you have to do is you can't present it as an interesting thing that you should work on. What you say is they're interfering with nuclear missiles. They're doing all this sort of stuff. They're a potential threat. We got to do this. If you don't do this, they're going to eat us. And I know for a fact they're doing this, that they put this threat thing because they wanted to present it to Canada. This is something I really shouldn't talk about, but they wanted to present it to Canada. And I was part of the sort of negotiation. And when it came to this whole idea, the Canadians wanted to put it through science. As soon as that was, one of the people, I won't say who it was, said this is a poison pill, and it was all over. And that was the whole idea, was Canada want to put it in front of science. They want to put it in front of armed services and intelligence, and they've got the money. That's the whole idea, is you present it as a threat. Unless you present it as a threat and scare the living daylights out of a bunch of senators and congressmen who don't know a thing about this and present it that way, you're not going to get any money. They're just going to say, get lost and don't let the door hit you on the way out. That's just a thing they have to do, and it's working very well. And that was the threat that Eisenhower presented. If you know the speech, I was at the Eisenhower Library. If you know the speech, it's actually, people say, beware the military-industrial complex. That's not what the speech said. It was changed at the very last minute. What the speech actually was going to say was, beware the military-industrial congressional complex. And the idea is that once you get Congress involved in the UFO thing, and there's jobs in everybody's district, you're never going to shut the money down. You're never going to stop this circle that Congress gives out the money because everybody's going to vote. It's like I say about the F-35 jet fighter. How many states is it built in? Built in 46 different states, and it's built for one specific reason. 46 senators are never going to vote if there's a cost overrun or if it doesn't turn out right, because they're got jobs at stake. Beware the military industrial congressional complex. Once you fill the circle in and the money starts to flow, you're never going to stop it. That's why they're doing this thing. But the threat thing is just an idea. If they wanted to eat us, they would eat us a long time. I say they're here to warn us about the ecology. They're here to warn us about nuclear stuff. They're absolutely furious about the nuclear material. And they're gradually trying to get our consciousness to rise, to realize we're all one, we're all together. It's the whole idea of Jesus, of love thy neighbor as thyself, to help the poor, help these people. Everybody is part of you. Everybody's part of it. And whoever you kill, you're killing part of yourself. That's the big idea. That's like this Yossi Ronen's book. It was called One. That is the number one message of the beings. Oneness. The idea that everything is connected, everything's one. And that's what happens when you do high doses psychedelics, especially ayahuasca. As Sting, the musician, said, when I did it, and he got an extra dose because he said, who's this Sting guy? We want to give, and it gave him an extra dose. And Sting said he suddenly realized everything was alive, everything was connected, and everything was one. And he looked down at a little flower coming out of the ground and he said, that's my brother. That's what the whole idea, but it's all one thing. We're all one. And that's the main message of whatever this phenomena is, whatever this intelligence is. And I say it's all connected to ghosts and all this kind of stuff. It's just different frequencies, different vibrations coming in. And we're at one vibration, they're at another vibration.
Katie, you're muted, Katie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? I sound like the commercial. Well, somehow we're almost out of time. We got a few minutes left. I will just say this. I'll push back just on one thing. I really don't think they're a huge threat to us either. However, I don't ever want to shame anybody that has a bad experience, because there are a lot of people that are pregnant and then they're not pregnant, or they your gut can tell you when something feels very off. And so they might not necessarily want to hurt us, but I always want to say that for anyone that's listening, that's an experiencer. If you had a frightening experience, and we can get into that on another show because it can be a very long thing. Yes, some of your perception is could be a little off based on what you think should happen during an abduction. But it's just because they're not necessarily a threat doesn't mean it's always kumbaya and a lovely experience. But really quick, because we've literally got just a couple minutes left, there was a question that came in from chat. Kathleen Hager, I've heard stories that the aliens are going to be coming face to face with us in 2024. Have you heard this? Again, we've just got a couple minutes left, but what are your thoughts on that?
I know Bashar talks about this. I don't think they can ever do that. because what they're doing is this gradual thing where we wake up and we realize what's going on. They're not, people confuse them with Santa Claus. Like they're here and they're going to save us and they're going to give us all sorts of toys and stuff like that. And I just don't think that's what it is. They're on a different vibration. You'll hear experiencers talk about it's hard to be around them because they vibrate so badly. I think we're still a long way off in terms of learning. They're going through the ground up through people. I know that story about 2024. I think there may be more open contacts and stuff, but no, I don't think they're going to land on the White House lawn. They're going to be shot because, I mean, we can't accept anything coming in over the borders. And anybody tells me that we're suddenly going to go, oh yeah, aliens, let the aliens in. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's not going to happen. They're going to shoot them every time they step up and stuff like that. That's not going to happen. It's this gradual thing. The Canadians were actually told, the guy who ran the Canadian government program was told this. He said, unless there is a nuclear exchange, we will never step in. If there's a nuclear exchange, we will step in. We can take the moon in front of the entire world, split it in half in front of the entire world, put it back together to prove that we can stop a nuclear exchange. Other than that, we will allow the human race to stew in its own juices. We have to learn our own lessons. They can't give us the answers. They can't do our stuff for us. There's going to be this gradual thing. We've got to figure it out. That's what's all about breadcrumbs. That's what, the way I see it, that they're never going to step in and suddenly come in here and rescue us.
Yes. So everybody be kind to one another, for goodness sakes. We all need to get it together. And I just don't remember a time when we've all been so divided. And so I hope that we all get the message. Grant, it has just been an amazing 2-hour packed show. I hope that you'll come back on with us at sometime soon. I have 2 new books I'm going to buy now, the magic book and the modalities book. So I'm going to purchase those as soon as I get off of here. You have so many great books. I encourage all our listeners to, go to Amazon and just type in Grant Cameron and look at all his wonderful books. Do you have any plans? Are you going to be at any conferences anytime soon? We just have a couple more minutes here.
Okay. I don't really come into the States much anymore because Homeland Security has told me I have to pay all my own costs. And I'm not allowed to be paid. So that sort of stops that. Unless I'm in the States, then if I'm close someplace, I'll lecture. I do have the 2 new books coming out, which are pretty interesting. One is on apports and manifestations, the appearance of stuff around people. And I remember I got a thing from Charles Halt from Rendlesham Forest. He said when this coin dropped out of nowhere, rolled across the floor and hit him in the boot. He was in the United States lecturing. It was a British £1 coin. And he said, when that happened, that changed my life. And so I have this thing about these things that appear to experiencers, disappear, stuff moving around. Yeah. And the other book I have is the Sky Pilot book, which I think is very important because it gets to the point that people tell the same story about flying the craft. And this idea that the craft can be any size they want. It's alive, it's conscious, it's AI. And, the various stories these people tell, it's just absolutely fascinating to show what we're actually dealing with here. It's almost like Einstein said, it's not only more magnificent than you think, it's more magnificent than you could ever imagine. And that's what I find with UFOs and with the universe. The more you look at it, the weirder and more magnificent it gets.
No truer words were spoken.
Perfect ending.
Chris. Yeah, perfect ending. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jerry, Jenna, Amanda Curran, our producer. Thank you so much. Grant, thank you. Of course, Katie Cook, thank you. Thank you to all our listeners. Thank you, Science Bob, for that wonderful donation. We truly appreciate that. You guys all have a great, Science Bob. Hi,
Science Bob.
And you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Tuesday night. Take care, everybody. Bye. Bye.